Welcome back. Today in our Sunday Spotlight, Connecticut farmers facing an extremely challenging growing season. Between a late spring frost and the recent devastating floods that we saw, crops across the state have really taken a hit, with some completely wiped out. Here with some perspective on what farmers are facing is Paul Larson. He's the president of the Connecticut Farm Bureau Association. He's also the owner of Sprucedale Gardens Nursery in Woodstock. Paul, thanks for being with us.
You're welcome.
And, you know, this is why we have the farmer come in, because we've been saying all show the two events. You said there's actually a third when you sat down, because we had that deep freeze in January.
That's correct.
So we had kind of a mild December, deep freeze in January, then things kind of go back to normal. Then in May we have a frost, and then we saw these floods last week. So what's it like to be a farmer in Connecticut right now?
It's challenging. I mean, it's always a challenging occupation, you know. They say you got to love farming to be in it, and that's certainly true. But this year has had some additional challenges that make it especially difficult for many farmers. Not all of them, but many of them.
Well, and certainly it's, you know, the tale as old as time, farmer fighting against Mother Nature. There's always challenges that are thrown, whether it's here in Connecticut or hundreds of years ago. But when you have these sorts of challenges, what are the options, especially in a state like Connecticut, where it's a lot of small local operations, small farms? How do you recover?
Well, that is a big challenge. There are some federal programs through USDA and the Farm Service Agency. The challenge is right now a lot of that aid is low interest loans. Well, a loan is still something you got to pay back. So that means the farmer is still taking on additional debt just to keep going. That's a challenge, you know, especially when some of them have, many of these farmers have used like a line of credit, for instance, or their own resources to get to this point. So they paid for their seed, they paid for their fertilizer, a lot of labor, all their equipment, and now we're about ready to harvest, and then this happens. And so it's really tough for some of them.
What can people expect crop-wise? What crops have been hit the hardest between those three events we talked about?
Well, certainly the fruit and vegetable grower, or vegetable and sweet corn growers, for instance, along the Connecticut River and other major rivers that have fields in those low-lying areas, they were hit especially hard with this flood. So, fortunately, it's not like we're not going to have squash and sweet corn at the farm stands. It's just going to be some farms won't have it, or they'll be buying it from other farmers.
And you were also saying we're on the very northern edge of peach growing, and so that late frost and even the deep freeze earlier in the year really hurt a lot of those crops as well.
Definitely. Any peaches coming in, most peaches you're going to be eating this summer are going to be coming up from New Jersey or down south. Yeah.
I know every 5 years Congress does a farm bill. Correct. And 2023 is the fifth year, so they're negotiating it now. I know there's so many interests across the country who want to have some say about it, but from the Connecticut Farm Bureau and for Connecticut farmers, if people are just maybe seeing articles in the newspaper, hearing about it, what are you concerned about in that bill? Well,
one of the things that actually I had a chance to talk to Senator Blumenthal the other day, and we talked a little bit about the one aspect of USDA and through the Farm Bill funding is the Risk Management Agency, RMA. And it's still so heavily catered to the larger commodity farm operations. And we really need to have some mechanisms in place so that smaller operations who represent an entire family and their livelihood can more easily apply for that kind of assistance and fit into the program.
Well, you had a grandfather at a farm in Portland. Your dad had a farm in Woodstock. I know your wife grew up around farming as well.
Yep.
So are you pretty typical of 5,500 farms in Connecticut, that sort of family encouragement?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up on a dairy farm. We started our nursery back almost 30 years ago. Started from scratch. And so we certainly fall into that category of small to mid-sized family farms. Yeah.
And you talked about having to have that love to do it. Do these, whether it's the nature woes or the federal government woes, does it start to beat that love out of you?
Some years it is challenging. Some years you wake up and you ask yourself, why am I doing this? So, the other thing is the average age of a farmer in the United States, and Connecticut mirrors that, is 59 years old. We need more young farmers coming into the pipeline to keep our industry going and viable. And it's great to have programs that preserve farmland, that improve access to farmland. It's great to have safety net programs like what we were talking about with the Risk Management Agency. But we really need to preserve the farmer. We need to have an industry that is profitable and farmers can, at the end of the day, say, this was worth it. This was worth my investment. Otherwise, the next generation is going to say, why would I want to do that? So any programs we can have, and any funding for VOAG programs, for instance, that we can teach the next generation to come in, that this is a real good option for them and a great living. And
we talked about the number of farms, but over 380,000 acres as well. So if we have about a minute left,
yeah.
If our viewers are watching this saying, why do I care? They should care, right? That people like you are still in business.
Well, the backbone of our rural Connecticut, atmosphere, where people are driving down the country roads and the stone walls and all that. Yeah, that's all agriculture. And if we don't have a viable agricultural industry, we have like $4 billion impact on Connecticut's economy and hundreds of thousands of jobs. But if those farms go away, guess what comes into that? It's going to be houses, and it's going to be more kids in school, and it's just going to be more urbanization of those rural areas.
No, we talked about all the challenges the farmers are facing. I know a lot of reviewers are rooting for you, and we'll be out at those farm stands and out at your nursery, maybe buying some stuff and supporting it. Paul Larson, thanks for being with us on CT23.
All right, my pleasure.
All right, that is CT23 for this week. Of course, CBS Sunday Morning is coming up next. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll meet you back here in Studio B next Sunday morning.